It was a Powerade commercial with Jimmy Graham, former tight end of the New Orleans Saints, and I know this is Dallas, sorry about that, but the New Orleans Saints and the Seattle Seahawks. And in that commercial, he says, we're all just a kid from somewhere. So I'm just a kid from Jamaica who is so fortunate to have TEDxDeepEllum, even though I wasn't included in the promo video stuff, you know, with everybody else. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today about my topic, inking online learners through community and collaboration. All right. So if you have young children or you just love Disney like that, you know about Maui. And Maui is this self-absorbed demigod of the wind and sea who has a fish hook and can shapeshift. And this demigod has an issue where he thinks he has done so much for humanity and humanity has not really appreciated everything that he's done. So you all know how the movie goes. I won't tell the movie right now. But here's the thing. I don't look as good as Maui does. And one of the most defining characteristics about Maui is all the tattoos. And he explains in his introduction to Moana what they all mean. So when we look at Maui, he says, all my tattoos have a meaning. They are experiences that I've gone through. They are victories that I've won. And so for this talk, I want you to think of learners as those little Mauis waiting on their ink, because what we teach them will leave an indelible mark for the duration of their lives. So how did I get here? Wanted a PhD. Sorry, I did. And so I was trying to figure out what it was. How should I go about doing that? Pick a topic and do something. But then I found out really quickly that if you're going to dedicate your life to something like a doctoral study, you really need to pick something that you love and will go to bat for. And so two events happened in my life, and they were really, really, really impactful. The first was I was part of a data council at my institution, and we talked about the success of students in both in-person and online. And what we found is that when students had any bit of in-person learning, their success rate was better. It wasn't the same for the online students. They had a lower success rate. The second event, quite as similar. I was at a research conference, and a then doctoral candidate presented her dissertation about the fact that students who were taking developmental math online were not as successful as those who had taken it in person. So a young aspiring educator whose Rate My Professors had taken a whole lot of hits, students were like, he's not really that good teaching online. I wanted to be part of the solution, not part of the problem anymore. So I started in 2018, and then 2020 came. And we saw the greatest disruption that we have seen in the world for over a century at least. And every industry that we know was impacted at some point, some way, some shape, some fashion. And education was no different. Education, we saw teachers forcefully distanced from their learners, and so the inking process that we had all come to know and love and had actually gone through ourselves got disrupted. And so we had to figure out, what can we do? Believe it or not, somehow it was a gift as well. Because for people who were working on dissertations and thesis, you immediately got a topic. How did COVID impact something that you love? And so actually one of my colleagues wrote a dissertation on that. And she talked about how schools tried to implement remote learning procedures. And we did the best that we could to ink the students throughout this time period that we had. But yet, as a society, we're still dealing with this concept of learning loss, right? So, you see, learning really takes three principles in order for it to work. The first thing we talk about is the content. The content is the thing that the person or anybody wants to learn. The learner is critical because that learner is the person who wants to learn that thing, and the teacher is the one who is qualified, or nowadays with Chat GPT and all that stuff, the thing that is qualified or credentialed to give you or teach you the information that you want. And so we have to figure out how to marry these three principles together to create some of the most effective learning opportunities that we can. Now, I think that when we learn together, there are some built-in structures that impact us. Number one, we have a mutual interest. You want to learn something, I want to learn something, or you can teach something, or I can teach something. We have this built-in accountability structure that as we go through, hey, are you understanding what it is that I'm saying? Are you really? Like, y'all with me? Cool. All right. I saw head nods out. There was a break. Either way. And then the third thing is this mutual experience, because there is something about going through stuff together that gives us this ability to step together, because as the theme of a lot of this Inc. conference is saying, we need each other. So something about online just takes that away, doesn't it? It connotes this idea of isolation. It connotes this disconnection. I have to do it by myself. And so that is something that we have to overcome, because you don't need me as an academic to tell you that learning together is really a better learning opportunity. So what I want to do is I want to set the context up to travel through a few learning theories with you, and then let us think about how we can put that all together to help learners at a distance have a great learning experience. So if you were to travel through the learning theories, three dominant practices come to mind. The first is behaviorism. Now, behaviorism is one of the easier ones to identify, and I feel like all of us have experienced that at some point. Have you ever taught somebody how to tie a shoelace before, if you have kids, right? Now, what is it that what is it that certifies to you that your child has learned how to tie the shoelace? That changed behavior, because now when that child does it, you're like, yes, that child now knows how to tie the shoelace. And so we see these observable changes, and then we're like, yeah, they got it. So we depend on these repetitive structures to do that, these drill and kills, this Pavlovian effect. Have you heard about that? The dog training and all of that, operant conditioning. These are the things that we do when we are practicing this behaviorist concept. And so in essence, we see the stimuli, we have a black box. We don't really know what the learner is doing, because the more important principle in this is the teacher. And then when we see the observed behavior, you passed the test and you made 100, or as schools say, 70 or better, you're all right, right? Then now you've learned. Now, if we travel a little bit more humanistically, we have cognitivism. And cognitivism, of course, cognition, you're thinking about the mind, and now we're not so focused on the changed behavior. We're thinking about the mental state. How has the mental state of the learner progressed as they have gone through what we've been trying to teach them? And so we have the stimuli from the changed behavior, and then we hope to see the learning state. Now, from cognitivism, you get the concepts of chunking. I find chunking to happen in music a lot. That's why these 5-year-olds can learn it, because the music is metered so that they can learn the bits and pieces that they need to. You find ideas of dual code learning, or you learn cognitive load theory. These are concepts that come from the cognitivist's mindset. Now, you also have the last idea, which is the idea of constructivism. And constructivism holds the notion that we are learning by doing. And in learning by doing, what we're doing is now saying, I'm not the focus anymore. It's the learner. And so now we're putting learning in the hands of the learner, because the learning is more impactful when that person, when that child, when whoever the learner is, does it on their own. And so from there, we find Liev Vygotsky bringing together this idea of the zone of proximal development. And it's from there that we get the idea of social constructivism. Why? Because you can do so much, you can do so much more if you learn with somebody. Now, it's not exactly learning, but I was at the gym working out with one of my friends. You can't tell today, but the first speaker told me that I'm still wonderful. So working out with him, all I could remember myself saying is, bro, I wouldn't have done all this if I was by myself. So you get so much more when you are learning with someone else, and it helps the learning process. So with teacher guidance, the learners can construct information, and then it's that agreed upon knowledge that we now say, yes, we believe that we have learned something. So bring it to online real quick, because you can't get all this with the internet and just Google. So 4 decades ago, which I hate to say that I was around for all 4 of those, 4 decades ago, this was a research interest. And people had started to focus on how do we design learning, understanding that there's going to be text-based inquiry at a distance. And so 3 researchers in particular came up with the idea of the community of inquiry. And what the community of inquiry is a model that essentially says that based on 3 primary presences, we can help develop an effective online learning experience. Now we have let me start with the cognitive presence. The cognitive presence of why are we here? What is it that we're trying to learn? It is defined as inquiry through sustained communication. And so by talking about it, by going through a bewilderment process of, hey, what is this person actually trying to get me to learn, from me exploring, from me integrating what I have figured out and then coming up with a resolution of what that solution is, now I'm building this cognitive state, and we want to achieve that. Teaching presence, which is the buttress of the model, it's not about the teacher, but it's saying that teaching can occur even from peer to peer, because we are focused on facilitation and how the instruction is carried out, and we're also focused on discourse. Social presence has somehow morphed into a life of its own, and if you were to research it, you would find so much more content on social presence than the other 2 themselves. Because social presence has to do with this idea of salience. It's about being there. It's about removing the fact that technology is between us. How can we create that human experience with each other, not focused on the fact that it is Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, pick anything, Google Duo, Hangouts. The technology doesn't matter. It's that we're here together and achieving this thing together. So in a community of inquiry, it now says, hey, we are showing ourselves as people. It is very important that if we design learning, we are focused on the human. It's amazing, a study that I found that showed that students in online learning are more concerned about collaboration and compatibility, not necessarily the pedagogy and the content. So who you are learning with is as important as what you are learning. So it seems like demigods always have a little bit of an issue with humanity, right? And let's say that we have the technology around, and we're tasked with the job of designing online learning for demigods to get their ink. Well, let's just say this. Can we design our lesson so that if Maui is to take this lesson, he could say, thank you, and then we can say ourselves, you're welcome. Thank you.